As you've heard, my wife and I and our family, we were serving in Germany for 20 years, and then when finances got a little bit tight with our mission board, they asked some people to consider early retirement, which we did. Retirement's a strange word. I'm not nearly old enough, as you can obviously tell, to really retire, but knowing that some people had to come home, we thought it might be a good time for us to do that. Since I was a young boy, I've always been very interested in sports. Wasn't necessarily always the best at them, but I was still very interested in watching those who were, especially those athletes who could accomplish feats that were almost unbelievable. They kind of became heroes to me just looking at the accomplishments that were just too hard to believe in. One of my heroes as a young man was Edwin Moses. I'm sure some of you are familiar with that name. Between 1977 in 1987, he won the 400-meter hurdles 122 times in a row. 122 times he stood at the starting line and was first getting to the finish line. Nobody does that. Nobody wins that many races. Nobody stays on top of their event for that long. It's even more impressive to realize that in 1982, he missed the whole year because of injury and illness, and he came back and picked up right where he left off, continuing to beat all competitors. And a lot of people will say the 400-meter hurdles is probably the most grueling, most difficult track and field event there is. He was simply better than everyone else at bounding over those 3 feet hurdles, 10 of them that he had to clear between the start and the finish line. He wanted to be the best at overcoming his hurdles, doing it better than anyone else. Now, I've never tried running hurdles. I don't think it would end well. My first grade teacher tried to hold me back because she said I was too uncoordinated for second grade. Now, my mom got involved. Don't mess with my mom. She got involved and said, "You are not going to hold my boy back just because you think he's uncoordinated." But she did keep me out of track and field events. That was probably a good thing, or I might not be here now. But I do have hurdles that I'm constantly confronted with, hurdles that I need to overcome if I want to share God's love with other people. Guys, just think about your reaction when you hear from the kitchen your wife saying, "Honey, could you come out in the kitchen and help with the dishes?" You've immediately got some hurdles you need to overcome. Now, if you're smart, you're going to do it, but sometimes we guys aren't that smart, and you might be heading for the front door, and you'll pay for that later. But sometimes the hurdles are more serious, more significant, and we want to look at an example this morning. The text is very, very familiar. It's the story of the Good Samaritan, but we're not going to look at it from the normal perspective. I want us to focus on what were the hurdles that this Good Samaritan had to overcome in order to show love to his neighbor. So if you want to open your Bibles and read along, it's in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 10. And I'm going to read just the last part of it, verses 30 through 35, just to get an idea of the story. You'll remember this story takes place because somebody had come to Jesus wanting to know what he should do to inherit eternal life, and he was told, "Love God, love your neighbor." And the man says, "Who's my neighbor?" And then comes this story from Jesus. Chapter 30. In reply, Jesus said, "A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he fell into the hands of robbers. They stripped him of his clothes, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. A priest happened to be going down the same road, and when he saw the man, he passed by on the other side. So too, a Levite, when he came to the place where he saw him, he passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he traveled, came where the man was, and when he saw him, he took pity on him. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring oil and wine on them. Then he put the man on his own donkey, took him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day, he took out 2 silver coins and gave them to the innkeeper. 'Look after him,' he said, 'and when I return, I will reimburse you for any extra expense that you may have.'" Heavenly Father, we read this story, and we start asking ourselves right away, what would have we done? And we can think of opportunities we've had in the past where maybe we've done the right thing, and sometimes when we haven't done the right thing. Help us, Lord, as we look at these hurdles this morning, that we will have more courage in trying to overcome the hurdles and not simply avoiding what you call us to do because of them. In Jesus' name, amen. Now, I have to warn you up front, I only have 5 hurdles that we're going to talk about. So according to Pastor John, the sermon's only half complete, but you'll have to bear with me on that point. Maybe Pastor John can finish it for me sometime. He'll come up with points 6 and 7, I'm sure. I think I need to mature a little bit more and gain a little bit more wisdom before I can come up with a 7-point sermon, but I've got time yet. I'm still a young man. Let's talk a little bit about the background of this story. It says the man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho. That's a stretch of about 18 miles. So it was a long journey on foot. And it says going down because the height elevation between Jerusalem and Jericho was about 3,000 feet. So Jerusalem's up here, Jericho's down here, and you are literally going down as you head towards Jericho. It was a very difficult, dangerous path to be taken. It was known as the Way of Blood because there were often robbers, bad guys, who would lurk off to the side, hide behind the rocks, and attack people who might be going down this path. So it was a dangerous path to be going down. Okay, let's talk about the priest and the Levite. The priest, he was a religious leader of the day. He represented the people before God, offering various sacrifices that were prescribed by the law. Levite referred to somebody from the tribe of Levi, one of the 12 tribes of Israel. All priests came from the Levites, but not all Levites were priests. Some helped with other functions, assisting the priests or taking care of other aspects of the temple. Okay, so the first hurdle we're going to look at is the hurdle of apathy. The priest and the Levite had a difficult time with this one. They're going down there, and they see this guy lying there, and he's pretty bad off, and they simply walked by on the other side. Now we're thinking, these are the religious leaders of the day. You're almost sitting back watching the story unfold, and they're saying, here's this guy lying by the side of the road, Jesus telling the story, and a priest and a Levite come by, and you're thinking, all right, man, they're the ones that are going to help out. That's in our society today. That's Pastor Craig. I mean, he's walking down the road, somebody's in need, he's going to stop for sure. But according to the way Jesus told the story, he said, nope, not the religious leaders. They just kept going by on the other side. Now, this is kind of what I think may have happened here. Bear with me a moment. They're walking down, just minding their own business, and all of a sudden, they see someone. Now, they have a decision to make. He's laying there. They don't know if he's dead or if he's alive. Now, the first thing most of us guys are going to do is this. We want to make sure nobody's watching. Because if somebody's watching, and then we come over here and we just kind of scoot by on the other side, we might be in trouble, especially if you're a priest or a Levite, because you're expected to do good. And if somebody sees that you're going by on the other side, it's not going to be a very good thing. In the end, we have to say that for the priest and the Levite, they simply didn't care. They didn't care enough to go ahead and stop and help this person. Now, I know there's some things prescribed in the law that if they touch a dead body, they're unclean for 7 days, so they won't be able to take part in their temple duties for that amount of time. But I think somebody laying half dead by the side of the road is worth going ahead and not being able to fulfill your duties for a while. You know, there's a lot of apathetic people out there, and we're sometimes guilty of apathy ourselves. We see people in need, and we just don't care enough to go ahead and help out. It's easier, more convenient to just keep walking and maybe even pretend we don't even see a person's needs. One of the jobs I have 2 jobs right now. I work in a school cafeteria, and I also work as a courier driver for a medical laboratory. When I went to do my run on Thursday, I think it was, the lady who always gives me the samples from the lab, she was telling me about a story how she went out that day to take a break and walked outside, and a man had collapsed in the parking lot. Nobody was there. She just saw this man lying there, and she had a decision to make herself. Nobody's there. She could go ahead and quick run back inside, pretend like she didn't see anyone, and wait for the next person to go ahead and take care of it. But no, she did the right thing. She quick jumped into action, ran inside saying they need help, got a wheelchair, went outside, managed to help the person who was just unconscious up in a wheelchair, rolled him back in when they could provide assistance. She jumped over the hurdle of apathy to help a person who was in need instead of just ignoring it and going by on the other side. So that's hurdle number one. Hurdle number two is the hurdle of what I'll call dislikes. Samaria was an area to the north of Jerusalem, and the people who lived there were hated by the Jews, and the Jews hated them. Now, this stems way back to the time when Israel was a divided nation, a couple tribes in the south, most of the tribes in the north. Samaria was eventually made the capital of the north, Jerusalem in the south. And there were some other things dealing with captivity and who had remained pure to the Lord and who wasn't. But we won't go into all of that. Just suffice it to say, they did not like each other at all. It was so bad that Jews heading to the north would often make a big, wide path around Samaria instead of simply having to walk through that part of the country to get where they were going. So they didn't like each other, not at all. And yet this Samaritan stopped to help somebody who was his enemy. Now, let's be honest. We all have people we don't like. We might not hate them, but we have people that we don't like. They might be foreigners, people who have different colored skin, or they might just be neighbors or co-workers. See, if we're walking down that path from Jerusalem to Jericho, and our son's laying there, of course we're going to stop and help. If it's our spouse, yeah, for sure. If it's somebody we know and we really like from work, we're gonna help that too. But imagine the person right now that you dislike the most, and you're walking down and they're lying there. That's where the big challenge comes. Whether I am willing to stop and jump over that hurdle of dislike in order to show God's love. So last time I worked in Germany for 20 years, as I mentioned. You know, there's a few things about Germans we don't really like. I know that's hard to believe. Germans as a whole don't really believe in bathing every day, and there's not much deodorant that they seem to use. And in the summertime when it's hot and you're crowded on a tram going through town, it can be a little bit unpleasant. They're also much more willing to tell you what you're doing wrong than what you're doing right. Critical, but not very encouraging. You know, in America we have a long-standing Bible translation called the King James Version. In Germany, a similar translation is the Luther translation. In the Luther translation, they look at a Greek word that can mean either to encourage or to admonish. Never once was that word translated to encourage. It was only ever translated to admonish. So we think about Barnabas being the son of encouragement. He's the son of admonishment. And their translation doesn't have quite the same impact, not what we'd want it to have anyway. Germans are not very friendly. You don't smile at people along the street. We even had trouble because we'd go in, we're trying to start a church. So we're walking around, we smile at people, try to say, how are you doing, things like that, as best we could in German. And finally, one lady pulled us aside and said, you know, you all are here being very friendly and everything, but I got to tell you, back in the days of communism, there were only one type of people who were friendly to us, and that was spies from the government. So right off the bat, we're trying to be friendly, and they're viewing us as somebody who's spying on them with some reasons other than just wanting to be friendly to them. So there were a lot of challenges there, a lot of things we had to overcome. But if we were going to witness to them, if we were going to share love with them, we had to overcome these dislikes. We weren't there to try to convince them to like the same things we liked. We weren't there to change their way. We were there to point them to the narrow way. That was our assignment. And the same goes for you. When you think about trying to think about somebody you don't like, your job is not to try to convince them to change. That's God's job. You don't have to do that. Your job is to be a loving neighbor, to share God's love to them, regardless of the things that you like or don't like about them. It's a challenge, but in many cases, the only way we'll be able to share God's love with someone is if we can jump over the hurdle of dislikes. Hurdle number 3. the hurdle of time. Hurdle of time. This can be a very big hurdle. We're all very busy, very concerned about time. Some of you have probably already started checking your watches to see how long I've been preaching. Is this going to be over soon? Is it going to be a long sermon, a short sermon? Because we're busy. We got things we want to do this afternoon. You got a whole gamut of things probably already mapped out for the afternoon. One of them's probably a nap, but I don't mind. That's on my list for the afternoon as well. But if we're going to help other people, it's going to take time. You can't just help somebody and not have it take any time. Now, this Samaritan in the story, it doesn't say where he was going. He was just happening down the same road, 18 miles long between the two cities, and there's a man laying there that's really bad off. Now, he had plans. He had an itinerary. He was going somewhere. He wanted to reach his destination by a certain time. He had planned out what he was doing as well, and he didn't count on somebody laying on the side of the road who was injured very badly. Now, he had a choice to make. Option number one, we saw what the priest and the Levite did. You simply pass by the other side and just keep on going, pretend like you never saw it. And the good news is your itinerary, it's still on schedule. You can still reach your destination at the desired time, and nothing's going to interfere with it, and nobody sees what you're doing. You're not even going to get any, you're not going to have any problems because of it. Now, there's also option B. I'm going to say option B is one that we like. This is the one we try to do. Option B is we do as little as possible, and then we run really fast to catch up and make up the time we just fell behind. So you might go ahead and run over there and quick pull out your Band-Aid, put it on where he's got a wound or something, or maybe go ahead and try to give him a drink of water if he's able to take a drink of water, or maybe put a 20 in his hand and leave a sign, please help this man, here's $20 I've donated. But you're going to do something really quick and then run on down the road, because otherwise you're going to fall behind. We like that. When we have an opportunity, help a little and keep on going. Option C is what he actually did. He stopped. He bandaged him. He put him on his donkey. He went slowly the rest of the way to his destination. He spent the night helping him, and then went on his way after leaving money with the innkeeper and promising to pay even more if it cost the innkeeper more than that. He was showing God's love to his neighbor the way God would want us to do that, the way God shows his love to us. We often want to say, but I don't have the time. We love saying that. There's probably a lot of people not here this morning right now because they say, I don't have time to go to church this morning. How many times has someone asked for your help and you said, I would love to help, but I just don't have the time? That makes us sound really good. We're really important people, and man, I'd be right there for you if I simply had the time. I use that one a lot. But it's really not about time. It's all about priority. See, we all have 24 hours in a day. That doesn't change from one person to another person. And when we say we don't have time for something, what we're really saying is we have something else that's more important to us. Now, that's not a bad thing. We have to have priorities. And we have to make choices about, well, there's two different things I could do at the same time. I got to pick. I can't be two places at the same time, so I'm going to pick one. And in all honesty, we know if somebody says, hey, could I have your help this Saturday? And you say, nah, I've got something more important to be on Saturday than helping you. It doesn't really go over very well. They're not going to like us very much. But the truth is, we may have something that is much more important that we really need to be doing, but we simply say we don't have time. I'm just trying to make the point that helping somebody else has to be a priority if we're going to jump over this hurdle of time, because we always have things that we could be doing, and it's difficult to make the decision to sacrifice what we wanted to do something else to help someone else. So the next time you get ready to tell someone, I'm sorry I don't have the time, just think about what you're really saying, what your priorities are, and whether there's an opportunity to change your priorities in order to show love to another person. The next hurdle is the hurdle of money. Now, this Samaritan in the story, he uses his own oil and wine for the injured person, put him on his donkey, paid the innkeeper, promised to bring back more money if anything was needed. And think about it, he did all of this for a person he didn't know, would probably never get thanks from, and had all the reason in the world to dislike. Those aren't the people we typically want to use our money to help out. We would prefer to go ahead and use our money to help out people that we like and that like us and that will say thank you because, we like hearing that. And just like time, people never have enough money. You can talk to some of the wealthiest people in the world and ask them, do you think you have enough money? Most of them, from what I've heard, will say, no, just need a little bit more. Just a little bit more, and then I'll be satisfied. Then I'll be happy. And when you get a lot of money, then you have to spend a lot of money to put in safeguards to keep people from getting the money that you've saved up. And it becomes a never-ending thing. You're afraid to spend the money because if you spend the money, then you won't have as much money there. So you start making it this passion to let your money grow, to protect it, to not spend it because you can't bear the thought of losing any of it. Now, that's not the same with everybody. And, I'm very grateful for the people who are generous with their money and use it to really help out and assist other people and really just show God's love through contributions because my wife and I served on the foreign mission field only because of the generosity of churches like this one, of people like you, who sacrificially gave that every year at the Lottie Moon Foreign Mission offering time, there was about $150 million that was donated through the Southern Baptist churches. Man, that's awesome. That's just incredible that much money came in. And we are very grateful for all the people who constantly jumped over the hurdle of money in order to support the people who were living around the world trying to share God's love with those who need it. Jesus even praised the lady who gave away her last 2 coins, even though we might think it's kind of crazy. We tend to think using our money to help others might not be a good stewardship of what God's given us. But Jesus would show us otherwise in the praise that he gives to someone who gave away the last bit that they had. Now, I'm not saying we should all give away all of our money and then we all need money from other people, but we just need to be willing to ask God what we should do with our money and then be willing to follow what he says, jump over that hurdle so that we can show love to others. I read a story one time of a couple who was really discouraged with the whole Christmas commercialism, and especially the husband. He didn't like the idea of his wife spending money to buy him presents. He thought that was just too frivolous, too commercialized. So his wife came up with a great idea that what she started doing was every year at Christmas she would take the money she was going to go ahead and give to her husband for presents, and instead she would donate it to a specific group somewhere in the area that needed financial help. And he loved it. He thought it was great because instead of him getting something he wasn't going to use, the money was being given to those who really needed it. There's opportunities that we have to use our money for good choices to help out others. But like time, it has to be a priority. We don't have money to help everyone. We can't, in Germany, we saw lots of beggars on the streets, and especially in the Eastern Germany where they don't have as much as they do in the West. We couldn't afford to give money to everybody that had it, and you don't have enough money to give to everyone who needs it as well. But you can go ahead and ask God to show you where you should be giving your money and then have the courage to follow through. One last hurdle, and that's the hurdle of fear. When the Samaritan stopped, he must have at least been a little bit afraid, because here's this person who's been beat up laying by the side of the road. He doesn't know how long ago it was. He doesn't know if the robbers are still there. He knows this road is notorious for having robbers, and if he stops, he's making himself that much more vulnerable for the people who may be waiting for somebody else to come along, and then while they're trying to help this person, they'll jump up on him from behind and hurt them and take their money as well. He could have simply said, I need to get out of here quickly because this is too dangerous. But once again, he jumped over this hurdle, he took a risk and overcame his fears and helped out. I mean, he probably got blood on himself. He didn't know if this person had a disease. They didn't have penicillin back then. He was taking a risk simply to go ahead and be a good Samaritan. We've probably seen headlines in the papers a number of times where somebody was getting beat up in a public place and there were bystanders there and nobody wanted to get involved because everyone was afraid. See, this hurdle of fear is very real. It happens to us. Now, there's times when fear is really good. Fear keeps us from making some very stupid decisions. I don't go ahead and just spend my time walking on the top of my roof just because it might be fun to be up there. If I fall down from the top of my roof, it's going to be pretty bad. Or other things. I don't go speeding down through town at 100 miles an hour. You could do that in Germany if you're on the Autobahn, that's okay. But you can't do that here. I don't go driving 100 miles an hour. I might cause an accident or the police might see me and give me a big fine. Fear keeps us from doing things that are bad. And that's okay, but at the same time, we can't let fear stop us from ever helping anybody who's in need. We have to be willing to overcome fear to do things, even some simple things like giving blood, even though we're afraid of needles, or maybe helping out with some poor kids in a bad part of the city where there might be reason to believe something bad could happen while we're there. It's not wrong to have fear, but we can't let our fear stop us from ever going forward with what God leads us to do. We have